Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
You know, culture shifts are happening in so many fascinating ways all across the world, even by just the simple act of standing up and trying to do what's right. And, you know, if you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean you are in the seats with once more. As always, my name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the host of this podcast, where we sit down with a wide ranging variety of industry professionals and we pick their brain about current projects, state of the industry, how they got started, and so very much more in a light and in a conversational fashion. And you know, if you like how we do things around here, I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that you do, because let's face it, you're listening right now. Subscribe. Hit that subscribe button on your podcast provider of choice. Give us the old 5-star rating. Give us a thumbs up wherever you get your podcasts. We're pretty much everywhere over at Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Google, and plus we archive every single one of our episodes over at our In the Seats YouTube channel. So if you can give us a like and subscribe there as well, we would absolutely appreciate it. Also, do not hesitate to follow us on social media. We're on the Facebook, we're on the Twitter, we're on the Instagram, we're on the TikTok, and we're on the Letterboxd for all sorts of fun updates. And finally, and I do dare say most importantly, please pay us a visit over at intheseats.ca for all the latest and greatest from the world of film, television, basically the moving image at large. Because, you know, if we love to write about it and watch it and talk about it, we love it when you come by and read about it and listen about it. So please, pay us a visit. On this episode, we are going back to Kingston. Well, we're still there anyway, but it is the Kingston Canadian Film Festival, which is running from March 2nd and through till Sunday, March 5th. I don't know why I blanked there, but it's a fantastic festival that highlights some of the best that Canadian cinema has to offer. And one of those films that is playing there at the festival is called To Kill a Tiger. It's a documentary, but it is really a powerful story. And it's a story of Ranjit, who is a farmer in India, who takes on the fight of his life, quite literally sometimes, when he demands justice for his 13-year-old daughter, who is the victim of a brutal gang rape. His decision to support his daughter in that culture is virtually unheard of, and his journey is unprecedented. And it is just, it's a stunning film to watch, but it's also a real testament to how culture can change and how culture can shift. And I mean, defending the right of a woman in that culture is not necessarily sort of the go-to like it is for people here in North America, but this farmer, it makes a fantastically brave stand, and it's something that's incredibly powerful and incredibly necessary to watch on so many different levels. And if you're around in Kingston while the film is playing, I do recommend you check it out. But first, we had the unique pleasure of sitting down with the writer and director of the film, Nisha Pahuja, who, you know, we find out about how she found this story and just chronicling it and really kind of diving into the social and the political ramifications of what Ranjit was trying to do, and how it rippled and had an effect in so many different ways. But it also, because it really speaks to just sort of the nature of masculinity, and how in many ways, in a variety of different cultures, it has taken on in the past a very sort of toxic sort of imagery. But this is definitely a turn away from that in a beautiful and I think important way for people to see. But you know, again, this is a movie that's worth seeing and it's worth checking out. So, like I said, if you are in Kingston and attending the Kingston Canadian Film Festival, which is running from the 2nd until the 5th, please check out To Kill a Tiger, because it is a powerful, powerful film. But please first enjoy our talk with the director Nisha Pahuja, because between you and me, it's a darn good one. First and foremost, just, I mean, thank you so much for the time today, and congratulations on the film.
Oh, thank you. Thanks so much. Yeah, and thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Now, I guess my first question is, like, walk me through the origin of you discovering the story and wanting to follow it. Like, what was that kickoff?
Yeah. So I don't know if you know this, right? So the film that I actually set out when I was making this film, I was making a totally different film.
Oh
I
wow,
was
okay.
making, yeah, I was actually making a film that was looking at masculinity in India. And I was following the work of Mahindra Kumar, who's one of the activists in the film. You know, he's the older activist that speaks to the men at one point and speaks to Ranjit in the woods. So I was following his work because he works with an organization called the Center for Health and Social Justice, and they I think they sort of realized about 25 years ago, they were pioneers in this field, but they realized about 25 years ago that the only way to have equality for women in India, the only way to really fight for gender justice was if you started to change the idea of masculinity. If you just started to actually deconstruct masculinity and give men a new way of being. So he works with men and boys around the country. And he creates these groups. You know, he goes into these villages, goes into these cities, and he creates groups, and they meet once a month for a long period of time, sometimes 3.5 years, sometimes 5 years. So this particular program that he was running in Jharkhand was 3.5 years. And over the course of me filming with him, I learned of this story because Ranjit was enrolled in one of his groups.
Right.
And I learned of this story through actually Mahinderji and Amit, who's the other activist, and they told us what had happened. And I said, well, can I meet the father? And can I? Do you think it's okay if I bring my camera? And they said, come to the village, leave the camera in the car. We'll introduce you, and if they're okay with it, then you can start filming. And they were okay with it, and we started filming. And actually, just to answer the rest of your question, so. I felt that Ranjit's story could be the spine, could sort of, could be the spine of a larger film that I wanted to make on masculinity. I wasn't going to focus just on Ranjit's story. I was actually going to use his story as kind of a thread,
right, right,
and still sort of explore the work that Mahinderji was doing, talk to other boys and other men, and sort of that work, these other storylines would kind of flesh out this film, and they would provide context. That was the idea. They would give us they would answer the why, like why so many girls are raped in India, why this tremendous violence against women.
And you have here sort of almost an aspirational story, just to understand sort of from an evolutionary standpoint on behavior and that kind of thing. That's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, I guess that dovetails into my next question, because I mean, obviously this is a very sensitive topic, and I mean, what he did was obviously unprecedented and pushing into some very interesting boundaries. Like, was the camera a hindrance for you, or was it something that he even at that stage was acknowledged that maybe the camera is a good thing, not a bad thing? Or was it either or was it just kind of neutral in the whole process?
I don't think the camera is ever neutral. I don't think there is such a thing as, when you're making a documentary, as soon as you turn on a camera, that's kind of gone. And of course, if you're a really responsible filmmaker, you're aware of that, and you try to mitigate the impact of that as much as possible. I think in our case, it was really interesting because we obviously are just observing, and I think there's a feeling that you really feel like you're in the thick of it with them. There's sort of an immediacy in terms of that. But without a doubt, I think Ranjit understood really early on the power of having us document his story. He knew, like, that it provided him a certain kind of protection, a certain kind of safety from the villagers, and it gave him a certain kind of strength, for sure, to know that there were people who were interested in his struggle. And I think he also knew that at court he was going to be taken seriously because there was a crew that was documenting what was going on. I mean, the legal system in India is complicated, right? It's complicated, and I think he knew that if we were there, that he would be taken seriously, that he wouldn't be bribed necessarily, although, there were attempts to bribe him by the court clerk. And also that it wouldn't take so long. These things can take years sometimes, right? So I think he understood the benefit of having a team around following his story.
No, I mean, something else that you framed in the film, which I really like, for me, really brought home the power of it, was just the conversations sort of in the village, between, the women who were just going, well, she's had sex now, better marry her off to this boy. What else can we do? And the men going, well, why was she there in the first place? And I mean, it really created this isolationist feel of what Ranjit was going through. How important was that for you to really place Ranjit on this island by himself to give us a sense of what he was going through?
Well, that's such a good point, actually. It's interesting that you say that, because he was absolutely isolated. I mean, there were a couple of families who supported him, but they weren't vocal, right? They didn't actually say anything. For the most part, everyone in the village, people in the village were against what he was doing. They didn't agree, obviously, with the fact that she was raped. I mean, they thought that was awful. But as you said, partly they kind of blamed her, and partly they felt it was better to just kind of to marry her off. But he was so isolated, and the family was so isolated. And I remember when we were filming, I kept thinking, how am I going to represent this visually? How do you create that feeling of him being kind of on the outskirts and on the edges? That was something that I was really conscious of. So I'm glad that I'm glad that you got it. Like, I'm glad that you felt that, that it obviously came through.
Well, and I mean, I'll admit, I'm a white guy who's not, sort of conscious of many cultural issues. But I mean, as I understand it, and what I got from the film is just that the village is everything. The village is sort of paramount, and to sort of step outside of that is a lot braver than what sort of we as Westerners would think it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason that is, David, is because, that the village is actually also its own kind of little ecosystem, and people's survival is tied into that ecosystem. So there's actually there was we didn't put it in the film because it just felt like it took us outside, but there is a wonderful interview clip where Inderji talks about why what he's doing is so important, and it's because you depend on, when you're that poor, right? When you're that poor, if you don't have food, you go to the local shop, and they'll give you grain for, you don't have to pay for it right away, right? Or your neighbors will support you, or they'll give you stuff. So it's just a way of being, right? They survive through these really kind of these sort of deep kind of bonds that they form. They look after each other. They take care of each other. It's one unit. And India is like that, period, right? I mean, it's changing now, obviously, but it is still very much a culture that's rooted in community and extended family. And the individual is not as important as the collective. That's still something that really defines Indian culture. So that's why it was such a big deal, because he was actually going against kind of the very fabric of the society and what the society is founded on.
Was there any pushback on you in terms of just access? I mean, not just only at the village level, but I mean, even more when it gets to more into the legal system.
Oh yeah, I mean, we weren't allowed to film inside the courtrooms, right? We were never given access into the courtrooms, and I have to say, really interestingly, we weren't we had no problem filming at court. No problem. People were really incredible, but we had no official permission, and they wouldn't give us official permission. They refused to give us official. They refused to give it to us in writing. But we had we were allowed to film, and it was incredible because it went on for the trial went on for 14 months, and I think we filmed a little bit before the trial started, and then maybe a little bit before the trial started at court. And we actually the very last day, the very 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 last day, when the judge is about to announce the verdict, like that day, right, is when we lost access. We were told not. Yeah, but it was fine because we had enough, and we had the story, we had the details, we knew what was going to happen, we knew what was happening, but we could never go back and film it at court again. So you couldn't, which means like just little pickups with maybe the public prosecutor, or like we were desperately trying to get some pickups with the attorney of the accused, right? The woman lawyer. And so that kind of stuff we couldn't get. And I kid you not, I just sort of poured through so much material, like so much footage, finding those shots of her like at court where she's on the phone, and so yeah.
No, I mean, I'm curious because, I mean, just going back to what you said before about sort of this men's group and changing the core definition of masculinity from a cultural standpoint. And I mean, in watching the film, and I mean, in watching sort of everything that Ranjit went through, on one end, I never got the sense that he was doing this in hopes of actually getting justice or actually winning, but there was a sense of that he had to try. And for you, in sort of documenting all this, do you think that is sort of a good example of the paradigm shift of what masculinity means from a cultural standpoint in India? Because I mean, again, it felt very much that he was being a man for his family. He wasn't being a man, quote unquote, by the definition or by the rules.
Yeah. I think initially he was. I think initially he was actually doing it. I mean, obviously, because he loves his child, but as he says at one point in the film, I have to do this because I won't be able to look people in the face if I don't, right? I'll walk around with the shame. So I think initially his motivation was ego and pride mixed. I mean, it's never just one thing or the other, right? Like there's always a mixture of things when you're motivated by something. And I think at the beginning, it probably was more, I have to do this, otherwise I couldn't call myself a man. And then I think eventually he just starts to realize that it's the right thing. And, as he puts it at one point, like at kind of his lowest point when he's threatened, and he says, well, if she's shown this much courage, like, and she's a child, like, of course I'm gonna go forward, and I'm gonna see this through to the end, And I think definitely he realized that this was important to do for his family. He had to do it for his family, especially his daughter. So, I mean, in terms of paradigm shift, I think he is a really great example of what men need to do and the champions that they have to become for women. So, and that's not to say he's a perfect person.
No, of course not. Yeah, I mean, who is, right? But,
yeah. But I think especially in an Indian cultural context, and this is why the NGO was so behind him, they knew that he could really be a role model, that he could set an example for other men.
Well, and that's it. Really, at the end of the day, those are the people who end up being genuine role models. The people who aren't trying to be role models, just the people who end up trying to just want to do the right thing.
Exactly, and that's ultimately what it comes down to, right? It's actually about doing the right thing, and it's what and that's why I think she is so incredible, his daughter, because she has that moment where she just says, isn't that what we were put on this earth, like to do right and to do, I thought that was really, really powerful. So
no, I mean, I'm curious for you because I mean, obviously, as a documentary filmmaker, part of the job, I can imagine, is just sort of being ready with your camera and going and pivoting, because again, it's not one of these things where, you know, you can lay out a pitch and do this and do that, but it's like, hey, no, wait, I'm in India, I found the story, we're changing the movie.
Yeah.
Like, from a creative standpoint, is that a challenge, or is that more of sort of what it gets you out of bed in the morning for the art form?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Well, you know, in this case, I have to tell you, what happened was I didn't change the movie until I got into the edit. You know, what I did was, while I was filming, and I filmed for 3.5 years. I you know, followed obviously Ranjit's story from beginning to end, and I kept filming with Mahindraji, the activist, who
Yeah.
was so incredible himself. And then I was filming with these two young boys who he was working with, and I filmed with them for 3.5 years. And at some point, I'm sure in the field, I was thinking, okay, well, you know, this could make this could make sort of an interesting series, or, you know, a two-parter or something. But I was really kind of stuck to this idea that we had this Ranjit story could be the spine of a larger film on masculinity, and we were all convinced of that, actually, like the whole sort of creative team. And I think it took us a couple of years in the edit. We were editing for a really long time, and it took us a couple of years, maybe 2.5 years in the edit, before we kind of thought, you know, we've got really great material here. All three stories are really powerful, but they're not working together. It's not working. You know, this construct that I had in my head, it's not working. And we showed, then we took an assembly. We had sort of a 5.5 hour assembly, and we showed it to two other editors who we really liked, somebody named Manfred Becker and Nick Hector. We showed it to them, and both of them said, you have two separate films here, and you need to just focus. You're trying to do too much, and you need to focus and just make a film about Ranjit and his family, and don't do anything else. And that's what we did. And it took a really long time, even in the, you know, even after that sort of light bulb, and even after, you know, even after we were told that, we were still, or I was, you know, still kind of trying to add bits of, you know, the old film. I still felt, oh no, well, we can maybe do this and maybe do that. But finally we just let all of that go.
Then that kind of spins into my next question. Like, how as a filmmaker do you engender trust with the people who will, you know, put up money for something like this? Because I mean, you're pitching X and it kind of turns into Y. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, this is why I love the NFP, right?
Yeah.
So luckily, for us, I mean, we didn't have any first window broadcasters,
Right.
on this project. So, you know, we had lots of fun. We had great support from Telefilm and OMDC and Hot Talks, and a number of other Rogers, and a number of other funds. But we had a great sort of supportive creative partner in the NFB. And I think the NFB just trusted the team. You know, they trusted me, Mike, and Dave, our editors.
Mm.
And they knew what we had. They were, you know, they were watching cuts. They were seeing things. So they knew that whatever we ended up with was going to be powerful. Like, we had, you know, very strong material. So they really gave us the time. You know, they really just allowed me to do what I needed to do in terms of my process, and supported it. Never once were anxious, or just allowed me to make the film that I needed to make, and the time that I needed to take.
Now, I mean,
It's rare.
it is rare, because I mean, it's one of those things that, I mean, like you said, it's rare. It doesn't happen that often, but in documentary, it really feels like you've got a bit more freedom to not just tell very dynamic and very interesting stories, but tell them in a very creative way. Because I mean, in watching your film, it was big, but it was intimate at the same time. And I mean, that's not something that's easy to do. And I'm curious, from your perspective, what is it about documentary that allows for, I guess, freedom in the form? Because I mean, if you were trying to tell this as a narrative, it would be a lot more constricting, as or like a drama kind of thing.
For sure. And I think so two things. I mean, one, you know, when you're sort of making even when you're making a documentary, you do have a plan in mind, just in terms of visually and how you want to tell the
Sure.
story. And certainly, when I was writing about Ranjit, when his story became clear to me, when I realized what a struggle was, that idea of kind of the epic and the small, right? Like it just kind of lends itself to that kind of a feeling. And I think the other thing, and this is why I love, love, love documentaries, is because you're actually reacting.
Yeah.
You're actually reacting to whatever life is throwing at you in the moment. It's a relationship that you're having with like time as it's unfolding and the story as it's unfolding. It's just a different process. So it's very I find it to be really organic, and that's what I love. It allows you to question and to explore, because it's something that is unfolding, especially if you're following a story like this, which is driven by verite and narrative.
Yeah.
So I think there's
Well, I mean, with this film, I think you've done something really important, because, I mean, not only is it a beautiful film, but I mean, it's an important film because, I mean, at least for me, I'm always reminded of the fact that, I mean, the external forces in the world, they want change to happen in this big seismic shift. And that never happens. It's about this, it's always about one person sort of taking a step forward. And that's how real change actually happens. And this is such a fantastic document of that. And I mean, I just want to thank you for the work. And just again, thank you so much for the time today.
Thank you so much, David. Really appreciate it. It's great,
No problem.
great talking to you, I have to say. So
Fantastic.
appreciate it. Yeah.
All right. Thanks again,
Thank
Nisha.
you.
All right. Bye. And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.